Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons. I've got this feeling.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and our winning streak is over, and we were collared by the Bulldogs, and this 2020 season could be slipping away from us. Joining me tonight is long-time Demonlander George. Good evening, George. How are you doing?
Good evening, Andy, and like our intro music, I think the club's struggling a little bit with their performances as well.
It certainly is. I don't think we can fool the Norm Smith curse any longer. Also joining us tonight, long-time caller to the show, Bimman. Good evening, Bimman. How are you going?
Good evening, Demonlanders. Good evening, Andy and George. And that I like the way that intro music actually sounds like a tape that's in that old tape deck I had back in 1979, listening to Led Zeppelin, sort of going in and out. So that's a very good, neat effect, Andy.
Well, that could be just your internet going in and out, but it was that song was recorded off a tape. So I purchased this tape. I've got it right in my hands here. The Come On Demons tape, which also includes Demon Dance. So maybe we'll play that at another stage. I might have to rip that off this old cassette tape here. But I believe they released that on vinyl as well back in the day. And I also had a copy on VHS for the trifecta. Boys, when we talk about before we do that, I might just do a bit of a housekeeping. We love hearing from Demonlanders, so if you'd like to join our program tonight to discuss any of the topics that we talk about, give us a call on 03 9016 3666. That's 03 9016 3666, or Skype us at Demonland31. We do love hearing from you all out there. If you're listening to the show live, come join us in the chat room at demonland.com/podcast. You can ask us questions or post comments there. If you're listening to the show at your leisure via SoundCloud, on demonland.com, or via an Apple or Android podcasting app, give us a subscribe and you'll receive updates when the new show drops. Leave us favourable reviews, helps more people find us. We're on Spotify and Stitcher too, so you can get the show that way as well. Go to demonland.com to find your preferred method of listening. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Demonland31, Twitter at Demonland, Instagram at Demonland31, or on YouTube, search for Demonland Podcast and listen to some of the interviews that we've conducted with current and past players and coaches. The one that we did with Aaron Vandenberg last week is up and ready to listen. If you love talking about the Ds 24/7 all year round, why not join up to Demonland.com and chat with other Ds fans about this great club? Well, sometimes great club. Boys, when you talk about 8-point games, you can't get more 8 points than this one, Bin Man. I know you love 8-point game talk. We're clearly fighting it out with the Bulldogs and the Blues for that final spot in the 8s. Perhaps you can throw Collingwood and St Kilda in the mix, given they've got byes coming up and their draws to come. But this loss certainly hurts our final chances and makes that the game next week against St Kilda, or this week against St Kilda, a make or break. Lose and you can probably kiss the season goodbye. But that brings me to before we go talk about that, brings me to my next point is, do we really deserve a place in the finals? We've beaten no one of note this year. Our wins have all been to teams out of the 8. I'm not including beating the Suns when they were in the 8. And you can argue beating the injury-depleted Collingwood might not count either. We just can't seem to rise to the occasion. We've lost to Port, Brisbane, albeit a small margin to Brisbane, Geelong as well, another small margin, West Coast, Richmond, and now the Bulldogs, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and Bulldogs are 8th now. They were 7th when I was making the notes. And next week we play 6th. It's a huge test. I fear we're just a middle-of-the-road team. I think the news... the good news is that I think we've turned the corner and we're no longer a bottom 4 side. and the 2 games after the Saints game will either confirm this. What do you guys think, George? Do we deserve finals with our performances this year?
You wouldn't think so, and we said last week that this was the 8-point game and really told us where we stand. I think the Bulldogs are certainly playing good football at the moment, but we're now dependent on other teams, other clubs to lose rather than us having our own future in our own hands, and we're throwing that opportunity away. However, looking at the makeup of the top 8 at the moment, I think for me there's probably only two teams that are really in it at the moment, which are West Coast and Geelong. I think every other side there has proved that they're fragile. I mean, Richmond just fell in against Essendon during in the last week. Brisbane fell in against St Kilda. So Collingwood are desperate to get some players back. So they might be a little bit better towards the end of the season. But I think we could be in that group that sort of sits somewhere between 3rd and probably 10th at the moment. But like I said, it's now up to other teams to start losing rather than us controlling our own fate.
Big man, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I don't mean this to sound a bit of a smartass, but we'll see. If we make the finals, we will have deserved it.
Yeah.
One thing I really like about this season is playing each game once. It's been a crazy season for the players and for everyone. And so there's so many variables. One variable in our favour has been our lack of injuries, and so that doesn't bode well for where we are. But I'm still relatively confident that we'll make finals. Certainly not as confident as last week. But the bottom line is, you don't win. This might be an exception this year, who knows? But you generally grand finals aren't won from outside the top 4. So if we make finals, it'll be in the bottom part of the 8, which would then be, of course, very hard to go on and win a flag. So we're really arguing about whether we're in the 7th to 10th, or really discussing whether we're in the 7th to 10th range, which is not really where we want to be. I guess.
There's I'm not sure if you guys have seen this. I saw this on Twitter just before the show started. I put it on to Demonland. There are some crazy statistics, crazy run home statistics, scenarios, I should say, that could potentially happen. We could win all of our last 5 games and miss the finals. It happened in one of 100 million season simulations. Where we win all 5, one in 100 million, where we win all 5 and miss the finals. And then there's Melbourne could lose 4 of their last 5 games and make the finals, and this happened in 4 of 100 million simulations. So, can you imagine us losing 4 of the last 5 and still making the final? That would just be a ridiculous scenario, but could happen.
But I could see us winning all 5 and not making it.
Oh, that is the most Melbourne.
Despite those incredible points, I could certainly see that happening.
That is the most Melbourne of scenarios that could possibly happen, us winning all 5 games and not making it.
I think that's known as in mathematics as the Melbourne equation.
Yes, it is. It is. Look it up. It is a real thing. Well, let's talk about this week's game. It was hard for me to sort of prepare notes for today. I was just it's just. Yep, this is Melbourne. We needed to prove ourselves against a good midfield, and I think we're really shown up. If you were explaining what had happened to someone who didn't see the game, I guess you can simply say they turned up the heat in the third quarter and we just fell to pieces. And I'm scratching my head. Were we, Big Man, I might start with you. Were we outcoached or were we outplayed?
Yeah, on that. I don't know that I agree, to be honest, that they turned up the heat in the third quarter and we crumbled. I saw that sort of comment a few times on Demonland.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they applied any more pressure in that third quarter than they had through the match. They definitely applied more pressure than us through the match, probably until the last quarter. But what we just didn't do in that third quarter was spread hard enough. And for once, the commentators were spot on. For me, it was a pretty obvious sort of problem what was happening, and the commentators pointed it out. They were transitioning the ball ridiculously easy from one end to the other, from their 50 back 50 to their forward 50. And as we talked about last week on the spread, as George noted about how well we've worked this year at covering the outlet and the switch kick, that clearly wasn't happening. And as I think of all people, Gary Lyon noted, we were first or second before that game in difficulty in the opposition transitioning it from their back half to their front half. And in that third quarter, you could have been excused for thinking we were the worst in that stat in the league, because they just torched us up that wing. So I think that for me wasn't so much about pressure. It was just that they came out after half time, and that's what I find most inexplicable, and didn't do the running required for what our game plan demands, but in fact what any game plan demands in AFL footy.
George, anything to add on about whether you think we were outcoached or whether it was just simply were outplayed?
I think it was a bit of both, actually. I think also Ben Man hit the nail on the head with one of the points. In that third quarter, although they kicked 6 goals straight, we had at least 3 opportunities that I can remember where we had a kick, either a set shot or an easy shot in front of goal that we simply did not put through the majors. If we'd kicked 3 goals in that third quarter and they'd kicked 6, that would have been we would have gone into the last quarter with a far better chance. And in fact, I think in the last quarter, at one point, we're only 16 points down. So we completely blew it off our own foot, goal-kicking efforts in that third quarter. But just as equally, as Binman has said, and also the commentators, the lack of response to the Bulldogs' way that they moved the ball out of our forward line effectively and into their up towards their forward line was reprehensible. That there was just nothing done. They had a simple policy, which was kick it short in the first kick and then run. And we just didn't have the pressure from the forwards and the mids to stop the run. Once the run had started, it was all over it. They're playing a similar style of play to what Richmond play. And unless we change something dramatically this week, it's exactly the same style of play that St Kilda plays. So we need to have that more forward pressure. It was interesting. I watched the Brisbane game when they played St Kilda, and Brisbane shut them down after probably less than half a quarter from doing what they want to do. But if we let them out, we'll finish up with the same result. So I hope the coach has seen it. He mentioned in his post-match speech that he noted that 4 goals of theirs came from our forward line. So take those 4 goals away and you've got a relatively easy match at the end. We didn't, simply because we failed to do what we were meant to do, both from the coaching and from the players.
And can I just pick up on that point, George, the out-coached or outplayed sort of idea is as you noted, the forward line just didn't put on that pressure that they needed to. But I think often the focus is on their tackling up forward, when it's really the forwards, the big defensive pressure they need to put on is that spread. And it's not really that first kick for the switch. I think it's the next one, because if that next one goes to someone who can immediately go, which is exactly what happened, well, they're away. You've got to someone's got to work hard enough to stop that next kick. They're not the one that comes from the switch, the second after the switch, because that's the one that releases the play. If they get across and even man the mark, even if you don't stop them marking the ball, ideally, obviously, you spoil it over the boundary line and get a stoppage. But if they can wheel and go, which is what they did, well, they're away to the races. And that's a forwards thing. The forward has to cover that, and Langdon's been so brilliant for us, and I don't know which side of the wing he was, but I wonder whether he was on the opposite side because he's one of the few players who right to the end of each game gut runs across and covers, and it doesn't look very, it's not a very sexy thing to run across and man the mark, but it's so critical, and they did it all day. It was so evident what was happening. So those forwards, I think Tom McDonald's lack of mobility, I thought he tried hard, and I don't want to have a shot at him, but they played through him a bit, and they stretched him. I don't think Cozzy worked hard enough on that outlet kick. I don't think Bailey Fritsch did either. They've just got to cover off that kick. Now, is that out-coached? I reckon it's more... What my concern is they didn't come out after half-time and just all over that and gut run, because that's, to me, where the coaching comes in, getting them mentally switched on so that, they come out after half-time and there's no chance of allowing a free player on that wing.
I thought our midfield was well beaten. None of our midfielders really fired a shot. Track seemed off his game. Oliver, I don't know if it was a matter of him looking gassed, but he only had 15 touches, which is very unlike him. Viney tries hard, but there was no sort of payoff. I think his kicking was a bit off, and Gus just didn't have that same influence that he's had in the past few weeks. I think we played accountable footy. Again, what you were talking about coming out of half-back, but no one was manning up Lockie Hunter. He was just by himself. He was free to roam the ground. No one was manning the Bont, and I thought we reverted back to our old ways in the midfield, with sort of all going in for that contested ball and flicking it out, but leaving our opponents to mop up on the outside, and then they were just away and, sort of link chain of handballs and they're out of there, and were delivering into their forward line superbly. What's his? I think. Who was their small forward, the curly hair guy? Wallace was.
Wallace.
He was just getting superb delivery into him. When you have a gun midfield like we've got, just not firing, and they've also got a very comparable midfield, and they seem to be firing on all cylinders.
I mean, I think for a big part of those, the kicks that they had in to Wallace so often were under no pressure, and there was one from Bont, and there's talk about whether we should, on Demonland, whether you go to put someone on him. But as we've talked about over the last few weeks, you do that, you sacrifice a player. But that means if you don't do it, everyone's got to put maximum pressure on when he's about to kick the football. And a couple of times, he got the football twice and had no pressure. And one was really telling. It's, again, as we've talked about often enough, it's hard to tell who's not working hard when on television. But there was one where Salem looked like whether he was exhausted at the end of a long run, I'm not sure, but he just didn't put enough pressure on Bonampelli, who just drilled a kick into Wallace, gave Hibberd no chance. But once again, with Wallace, it was those small and medium that hurt us.
I thought one of our biggest strengths in 2018 was using Harms in a negating role. Why not make a move and put Harms onto one of these guys? For mine, he's not, and I've said it the past few weeks, I don't think he's cutting it in defence, and I think to do nothing to negate Bontempelli or McRae was a bit of a failure in the coaching panel, and that's why I'm sort of a bit in the camp of that we were out-coached because we didn't make moves like that. George, would you have been in favour of us negating one of their mids?
Sorry, you dropped out.
I think
that was to George.
I think the difficulty was highlighted then, who do you move out of the midfield? Quite frankly, Harms is not playing well at the moment. He's very fumbly. He's not sure. He's not marking the ball. So I'm not sure whether he'd provide the value that we need. And I think it's also very easy to forget how good Bontempelli and McRae are as players. I don't know that you can stop them all that much. What really disappointed me was that basically the mids, both our mids and their mids, got similar sort of statistics in terms of possessions, but the quality of their mids was just so superior. That when Bontempelli kicks the ball into the forward line and lands on Wallace's chest all too often, and McRae does the same thing, it's because they're very good players. We seem to revert to what we were doing 4 weeks ago, where people like Oliver were back to getting the ball out as quickly as possible by handballs. They don't seem to have learnt the lessons of calm down, take that little bit of that step, take a deep breath and deliver it properly. We were back to just flicking it out and hoping the hell that somebody else got it. We were just outclassed in the middle, which was a real pity because Bruce in the ruck gave us huge opportunities, which we just didn't take successfully against this week. So it was disappointing from the mids. It was doubly disappointing when you looked at the scoring that came from our mids. Oliver was the only one who kicked a goal, whereas 4 of their mids kicked a goal. Again, in a game that's decided by only a few goals in the end, that's part of the reason why we lose the games. That we're just not getting the output necessary from the mids in a whole series of areas.
But they made that change after half time. We'd taken control of the game. They made a relatively simple move. They took Tim English out of the ruck. He was getting monstered by Bruce. They replaced him with Bruce, who had done nothing up until half time. They were using Dunkley in the ruck. We could have made a move. We could have done so. I can't remember where I read this, but someone had suggested, when Dunkley's in the ruck, get Bruce to just thump it forward and have someone like Petrarca forward, pump it towards him, sort of out of that midfield area rather than just sort of palming it down, because some of Bruce's palming downs were going straight to Bulldogs players anyway. So maybe we use that big size and strength and clear the ball out of it. Do something. I just don't think we sort of thought outside the box, and I think we keep just trying to do the same thing, and it just wasn't working. And you said we reverted back to what we were doing 4 weeks ago, and that brings it back to, are we just flat track bullies? Yeah, we can do this against the weak teams and have that extra time with the ball, but bring a quality team in, a quality midfield, and we fall to pieces. Just imagine what's going to happen against St Kilda.
Yeah.
On Bruce, he had it was 42 hit-outs to 13, and that's sort of more grist for that mill about the value, the discussion about the value of the ruckman and particularly moving English forward and Bruce up onto the ball. But one of the curious things around that, they were using Dunkley for their throw-ins, and it was strange why they didn't just grab it out of the air and try to take advantage of that. Like it was. And I'm not sure, George or Andy, do you know if presumably the boundary line throw-ins are counted in the hit-out stats, are they?
Sorry, can you just say that again?
Are the boundary line throw-ins counted as part of the hit-outs in the hit-out stats?
I would assume so.
Yeah, it'd have to be because,
with
the number of
42,
goals,
13,
there's insufficient to get 41 hit-outs.
Yeah, so 10 of them would have been the ones against Dunkley. And what did we do with them? So they basically had Bruce up against Dunkley, who's barely 6 foot, I wouldn't have thought. Didn't take any advantage
Dunkley's 194
that at all.
Sorry, George, you said Dunkley's 194?
194, yeah.
It's certainly a failure.
The other player that I thought was fantastic for them.
Go ahead.
The other player that I thought was fantastic for them was Liberatore. He I don't know what his numbers were, but his contested ball at one point was just through the roof, and he was really the heart getting the ball out, and I thought it was a big factor for them in that, right through the game, but particularly that third quarter where he was the dominant midfielder, I thought.
I just wonder, what if we would have had the same result had Gawn been in the side. Certainly his palm works better, but we have seen against quality opposition sometimes the midfield just sort of shark it off him. So I don't know. Look, it's a moot point because he wasn't there. But I do wonder what would have happened had he been there.
Well, a question I had in the game actually afterwards, there were a few, and I mean, for me, it sort of did reinforce that we're a middle tier team, and in some ways, I wasn't that, angry about that as disappointed as I was perhaps in the Port game, but because of that, it did reinforce that that's where we're at. And the middle of the sort of table team can't go without their best player, can they? But the thing that I thought was noticeable really was the leadership in that third quarter. George mentioned not taking our chances, which is spot on. If we had in the third quarter, we would have been in that game. We would have come home with some confidence. But you had Melksham give away that 50, which was just appalling. And that put it out to 24 points, I think. And for me, at that point, I thought, well, that game's over. We're not coming back from 4 goals against them. And I just wonder, Gawn's leadership would have been a massive factor in that game, because I can't imagine he would have been not working hard. Not that Bruce wasn't, but Bruce is obviously not the player Gawn is. And I thought we lacked a bit of leadership in that second half. Viney tried hard, but we really needed someone to just put themselves in the game and say, well, we're not going to lose this game of football.
We've talked about them, their ability to waltz the ball out of our forward line and bring it down the ground with ease. Caleb Daniel, JJ, Crozier, they had a field day across half back. All clever players who use the ball well and able to hit targets in those tricky conditions. Yeah, it's, just George, I think you pointed out in your match review that scores from turnovers 59 to 23. That's cost us again. Those numbers were bobbing up during those games sort of against the top tier teams, and it's happened again. We're being made to pay by quality oppositions, and obviously this wasn't happening for that 3 weeks, the miracle 3 weeks we had 3 wins in a row. But it's those turnovers are costly.
Yeah, the two things there, the waltzing the ball out of the forward line, I think we briefly talked about, but it was like I said, the Dogs run it out. Geelong took us apart with short kicks. The Dogs took us apart with running it out. And those players like the Daniels and the Croziers and the like. And we just weren't, as Big Man said before, we weren't applying pressure to them. I went from one end to the other, as the coaches noted, on 4 separate occasions, and the Melbourne player didn't touch the ball. There's just not enough pressure being put on the individual players. I see the setups that we're putting in the back line, in our forward line. I don't know whether we've got a sufficient press up there. This is the pity of watching on the television. But just as equally, the turnovers were absolutely killing us. The unforced ones were the really critical ones. That just when you give a team like Footscray, and St Kilda will do the same. They did it on multiple occasions to Brisbane. If you give them the opportunity, they'll take the ball from one end of the ground to the other, and they will score every single time that they go down there, because you're so far out of position when it happens. If we keep doing that, then we definitely not be making any finals, and certainly not beyond. So some really critical areas that need to be addressed before next week.
Further breakdown for that third. 1 sec, B-Man, before you go on, George. That third quarter scores from turnovers. They kicked 5 goals to our 1 point. The third quarter was costly in terms of turnovers.
There's the game, isn't it? We gave them the game in that because of turnovers.
Go ahead, Bin Man.
I was going to say, am I going to touch on the conditions? But for me, it goes to one of my hobby horses that I've been banging on about for a long time with the club, is that we've just got too many poor average to poor kicks, and Bulldogs are a team that have specifically recruited under Beveridge a number of players who are above average and a number of elite players. Like you think of Hunter, Bontempelli, Caleb Daniels, all those players I mentioned last week that are brilliant kicks. So if your work is, if it's 85% might be all right against the Pies because they don't have the same level of elite kicks. But in those conditions, it's a bit like golf. The wind will destroy bad technique, and we've got so many players with bad technique, and it was evident. And they've got most of their players, or a good chunk of their players, the ones with the ball, have been asked to do that switch or that kick that just has to hit the target, and they're kicking for goal, it must be said. They've got great technique, and I think the conditions really showed that. And there was a kick that brought it home for me where Petrarca turned it over trying to cross, and he just couldn't get it over the top of one of their players, and it was pure, he just didn't hit the ball, and that was a technique issue. And in that sort of wind, the technique is, poor technique will get exposed every time in wet but particularly windy conditions, and I think it did, and that was a huge factor in the game.
Yeah, I guess the training on the windy Casey ground hasn't really helped us much. Those conditions were horrendous. They didn't seem to have the same problems we did. I thought we struggled to kick over the mark quite a few times. I'm not sure if that was as a result of the wind, that they were trying to keep the ball lower, or what happened there, or they were just brain farts. But that definitely cost us. Our forwards just couldn't execute. As I said, the wind was unforgiving. It was highlighted the most when Bailey Fritsch had that goal from 30 metres out, 25 metres out, and he sort of even kicked it a little bit to the left, and the wind just took it right to the right. I've never seen the ball move like that. Well, not for a while. You don't usually see that at the MCG anyway. But obviously, the ground we're playing on is a lot more open. Certainly, one end of the ground is.
Speaking of golf, it looked exactly like one of the golf shots.
Go ahead, B-Man, sorry.
No, I was just saying that, speaking of golf, that looked exactly like one of my golf shots, and that's how I hit them in the perfect conditions, so you can imagine when it's windy.
George, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just to reinforce what B-Man said, even that Bailey Fritsch kick highlighted the lack of technique. He might have only been 30 metres out, but he tried to steer it through and didn't put enough oomph into the ball. He tried to kick 30 metres from 30 metres out. He should have been trying to kick it 50 metres. The ball got taken by the wind when it lost all its momentum. If he'd kicked it hard, and the same applied to Pickett's kick when he tried to dinky it over the top from about 20 metres out. If you don't kick through the ball in windy conditions, it will get caught by the wind. If you try to kick from 50 and it finally, when it does lose momentum, in that last 10 metres, you can forgive that, but not from 20 and 30 metres out. It was just about technique, and we've seen it multiple times in the season. We don't seem to adapt to conditions.
No.
When it's wet, we try to pick the ball up instead of kicking it off the ground. The other simple stuff that you teach in under 10s, we just don't adapt. And once again, we paid. In that third quarter, if we kicked those 3 goals, we would have been in the competition come the final bell. But we were so far behind by that stage, we're never coming back.
Bailey's
and even
go ahead, Bin Man.
Sorry, even George, in that last quarter, when we did get a bit of momentum up, we turned it over. Missed shots turned it over. I mean, we didn't really deserve to get back into it, but we could have. And we turned it over. I think it was track again, but turned it over in the middle, and that was that. But I think we kicked the goal, and we were pushing, and we turned it over with an appalling kick, and that was the game.
And you look, Bailey Fritsch, 1 goal 2, Melksham 1 goal 3, Cozzy missed 2 that he probably should be kicking. The straight kicking, it's been an issue in games we've lost, and this week was no exception. It's not the only excuse for the loss, but one of many contributing factors. But I thought we had quite a few passengers in the forward line. We've sort of touched on this in terms of tackling and pressure. Hannon, Spargo. Pickett, look, he had 5 tackles for the match, and then there's Melksham as well. And George, you pointed this out in your report as too. T-Mac, going into the ruck, we've left Weed again being, only left. Weed was left to contend with 2 backmen, who certainly made us pay as well.
Just before we go on about the transition that they were able to do, there was a poster on Demonland on that tactics thread, the game plans and tactics thread, a first-time poster, Canary and Burns, that looked at some statistics for the year and put a remarkable stat up that in our losses this year, we've averaged 28 less uncontested possessions. The differential was negative 28 in our losses, and in our wins it's plus 2.3. That's a remarkable stat in terms of pointing to the likelihood of losses. If we lose our uncontested possessions against the Saints following that trend, then we're going to lose the game, you'd think.
Yeah, I just saw that post just before we went to air. It was a good one. George, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was just about the forward line pressure as well. Do we want to talk about that briefly? Or?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there was some interesting statistics that were dug up by Axis of Bob during the week, talking about the pressure and the tackling that comes from the forward line. Just to give you a brief rundown, when we talk about the lack of pressure, the lack of effort, so far this year, Bailey Fritsch has had 13 tackles from 12 games. Pickett has had 27 tackles from 10 games. Melksham has had 14 from 12 games. Of those, Fritsch has had 8 in the forward half out of 12 games. Pickett's had 11 out of 10 games, and Melcham's had 6 tackles in the forward 50 out of 12 games. Now, that's bad enough on its own from my perspective, where someone's only tackling in the forward half when you're a forward, in the forward 50 when you're a forward. But when you compare it with other sides, how about this one? Brent Buffett at the Cats has had 66 tackles in 9 games this year. At West Coast, Josh Kennedy, 12 tackles in 10 games, including 10 in the forward 50. Jack Daly, 28 tackles in 11 games, including 14 in the forward 50. And then you look at other clubs like I mentioned Parfitt at Geelong. Hawkins has had 18 tackles in 12 games at Geelong. Gary Rowan's 8 tackles in 11 games in the forward 50. We are miles behind these successful sides, and like I said, Geelong and West Coast are my tips to be playing off in the grand final. Unless we get up to that standard, we're just not going to get the opportunities that we've seen Richmond win a couple of premierships based on forward pressure. I don't think they're at the same level this year, but that's how successful teams keep the ball in their forward 50 and keep scoring. We're just not doing it at the moment. We've approximately got somewhere between half and a third of the necessary pressure coming from our forwards.
It's an interesting point. Yep. I really don't think we can be compared to any of those top teams, and until we start doing those things, we won't be. Simple as that.
On that point,
yeah, go ahead. No,
we've got this delay.
No, I'll just to our listeners, there is a bit of a delay. It's our internet, so apologies for that. We're not in the room together, so we don't have those visual cues either. But go ahead, big man.
I was going to say that same post that I quoted the stats from Canary M. Burns, he noted that by his count or her count, they've had the D's have had 15 players playing forward this year, excluding resting mids like Petrarca. And he makes the note that surely that's not conducive to executing our zone and forward half. And I think it's a really good point. I listened to the Zoom meeting with Lever during the week, and he talked about football now is all team pressure, and that it's critical that the forwards and mids play their role. And that's been the difference this year for us, is that the pennies dropped and they're finally playing their role. Well, if you think that the back six, it's important for, it's a given that a consistent back six helps synergy, and that's been accepted as long as I've followed footy. Well, the same applies by logic to the forward line. The more settled they are, the more they know where they should be in terms of the zone. They know who's going to go tackle that player, so I think that's not excluding the mids like Petrarca 15 through. There's a lot of players in 12 games of footy that have gone through that forward line.
Yep. All good points. And look, when you talk about our back line, I don't think you can pin any of the blame on them. May was outstanding on Norton, keeping him goalless. I saw a stat this week about May. I'd love him to be in calculation for All-Australian. Unfortunately, I think there's other players from other teams who probably will take that, but he should certainly be in the conversation. I'm just pulling up, I got this off the internet, one sec, it's just in my screenshots. So May this year, Josh Kennedy 0 goals, Mitch McGovern 1, Tom Hawkins 0, Tom Lynch 2, Ben King 1, Gunston 2, Hipwood 1, Charlie Dixon 0, Himmelberg 0, Walker 0, Ben Reid 1, and Norton 0. And that's goals scored on May. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 goals scored on him this year from all the games we've played. It's a remarkable effort, and certainly I don't think there's any doubt that trade has been a win for us. Although you might say it depends whether you think Jesse Hogan being in the team would make a difference to our forward line structure. But look, again, moot point. We don't have him there. But the fact that May's in there was certainly an area that we needed improving, and he definitely straightens up that back line. So fantastic. Big man, May, you're happy with him?
Yeah, I'm loving him more each week. And one of my favourite Melbourne footballers was Stephen Ick. And he's starting to remind me of Icky, the way, how reliable he is. Ick, I just always felt that he was a player who, gave you the same level of effort every game, win or lose. And May's approaching that sort of level of consistency. And we talked about Norton last week. He's a serious player, Norton, and he could barely get to the ball. I think May's kicking seems to be, it was probably about the best in the team, just about. I thought he didn't miss many targets that I can recall. And I really like his competitiveness too, and I wish a few more players had sort of shown his willingness to fight in that third quarter in particular. And yeah, he's fast becoming one of my favourite players. George, you a fan of Stephen May?
Yeah, definitely a big fan. I think I much prefer to have Stephen May playing in the side than Jesse Hogan, particularly at the moment. So again, I saw the Brisbane St Kilda game as well over the weekend, and unfortunately I think the only downside that Stephen May might face in terms of an All-Australian position is Harris Andrews at the Brisbane, who is the embodiment of Stephen May and Jake Lever in the one body. He is something even more. Again, his intercept marking and his intercepts and spoils on top of his strength and height. He's surprised. I think he's 201 as well. It's surprising, but I'm very happy that we've got Stephen May.
I thought Lever was played, his intercepting, spoiling role well, but I guess where the back line fell down, it wasn't the back line necessarily that fell down, but it was just the ease with which, and we spoke about this, that they were able to continually get the ball into their forward 50 under no pressure. That was our undoing. Yeah.
One thing, though, that I would say, and I'd say this with some hesitation for fear that of my OMAC confirmation bias is washing through, is Tomlinson, I don't think plays with a huge amount of energy. He was fine at 6 possessions, but he's not super flexible, and nor was, to be fair, is OMAC. But they had a problem with Wallace, and the problem was that they ended up having to put on Lockhart. He was too strong, too smart for Lockhart. I think they tried someone else, and maybe even Lever might have been transferring on him at one point. Ended up putting Hibbert on him, and Hibbert's no good one-on-one, and he's no good deep. He takes away his strength, which is his half-back running.
Yeah.
And for me, the logical player to go onto him was May. But they weren't going to take May off Norton.
No.
Because Lever nor Tomlinson I'd be confident, or they would be confident either, would do the job on Norton. So I've seen them play May on Cameron, on Elliott for Collingwood. He easily could have taken Wallace, and Wallace plays like a traditional full forward. He comes out of the square, and the only player I would have thought that I'd be confident, he's a good player, Wallace, he uses his body super well, is May, but they couldn't move, be confident of putting Lever or Tomlinson on Norton. And I guess people would say, well, they wouldn't be confident putting McDonald on him either. But nonetheless, it was a concern, and I thought that was a really smart matchup problem that Bevo created for the Dogs.
Well, that's the end of my notes for the game. Do you guys have anything you want to add? I noticed, Big Man, you said you wanted to talk about Bartlett's comments that he made. Was this the comments he made a couple of weeks ago, or has he made some new comments?
Yeah. No, the comments after the Port game, we talked about, how clever or, whether they were the right thing to do a few weeks back after the Port game. And I was just thinking after the game is that one of the problems with the comments is there a break-in case of emergency sort of thing? How often can a president, particularly one who doesn't say anything normally, come out and criticise his players the way, and the football department the way he did? And so they used it then, but they used it ahead of 2 games we're almost certain, you'd hope we were certain to win against the Crows and the Roos, and then a depleted Collingwood. So a game where we needed to win. In many ways, you could argue this game was a lot more disappointing than the Port game. We had a 7-day break. We're up against a contender for the spot in the 8 that we want. They're a peer, a team that are about where we are on the development ladder, so to speak. Like we talked about, it's a classic 8-point game. Port were flying at that point. And these are the games that we've lost over the last year. I think back to the 2017 game against Collingwood, the last game of the seasons where we did make the final. Last year, 2018, probably not so much last year, but that's the knock on Melbourne. I heard someone on the radio say, well, you just don't know what you're going to get with Melbourne. And the problem is the Port game was an outlier, but you wouldn't get many Melbourne fans say that this game was an outlier. And until we eradicate this sort of game being the norm for the footy club, well, we're not going to win a premiership. It's just not going to happen. And in some ways, Bartlett's timing of his comments meant that, he can't come out this week. And I would have been happier for him to come out this week and criticise that effort, because it was a game we needed to win to make the finals.
Mm. Yeah, I would have thought you'd keep that one in the pocket if we had lost to Adelaide the week after Port, because you're right. He can't bring it out. He can't trot it out. He can't now trot it out now unless we fall in an absolute heap and end up bottom 4. Maybe he can come out and say something. But yeah, it is strange one. George, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the difficulty is the old benefit of hindsight with these things. You might recall that Jeffrey Kennett also came out after Hawthorn had 3 successive losses and gave it to his players as well in a letter that he sent out to all the Hawthorn members, when he said coaches can only do so much, players must be up to the task. And in both cases, prior to Hawthorn losing those 3 games, and Melbourne's position after the Port game was everything was at stake for both of those clubs at that point. If you don't lift your game, you're not going to be making finals, is basically what the presidents of both clubs were saying. And they can only use it once in a season, and you can't use it when the season's been lost. You've got to use it before it's lost. And the other thing is, it's not designed for the players, it's designed for the supporters and the sponsors to make sure that the club is focused on what they are meant to be achieving. So I don't read as much into it as other people do. It makes the supporters feel good, because at the end of the day, clubs are about selling hope and faith to the membership and the sponsors as well. And if you don't do anything, you're not going to keep the faith and the hope of those sponsors and members. So I don't have a problem with it. Everybody can be critical after the event, but it's done and it's done. I don't think you'll see a team that's sitting at the top of the ladder doing it because they don't need to do it. I don't see a team that's sitting at the bottom end of the ladder because there's no point. You're only going to see it from those clubs who are challenging in and around that 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th position during league. You'll start to see it coming out of Essendon, as we've already seen from Matthew Lloyd, I think it was today, criticising the club. It's the sort of thing you expect when people have expectations about where their club should be performing.
All right.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, that's probably a good point. Perhaps, really, I guess the issue is the fact that it isn't an outlier. So, perhaps you're right, George, in terms of it's a bit neither here nor there, Bartlett's comments. But, I guess the problem is that, from my perspective, that it wasn't an unusual game for us. It wasn't something that I was shocked that we didn't come out and perform the way we should have. Even after half-time, I wasn't shocked. I was disappointed. But it was hard not to think this is par for the course for us. And a strange way why I'm confident we'll win next week. I actually think we'll win next week because that's the pattern. We play well for 2-3 weeks. We get our sort of collective expectations rise. We're in good form. We lose a game that form would suggest we're in a good shape to win. We get whacked around the head and we come out the next week and win. So, I think it's a pattern we've got to get out of if we want to be a serious footy club and a top 4 contender, which is what Bartlett had talked about on Demonland being the goal, is to be a year in, year out contender flags, which means you've got to be a top 4 side.
Well, we're not. We're certainly not there yet. Definitely not. So, let's watch this space. Let's move on. We've got a game coming up this week. We had a scratch match against the St Kilda Twos this week. We had a couple of North Melbourne players playing in our side. I know I saw Majak Dor in a Demons jumper. I'm not sure who else from North played in the team. But apparently we ran out winners. They weren't keeping score, but in a 16 versus 16 encounter, they said we would have ran out the winners. So I think Josh Wagner booted a couple of goals. Neil Bullen played in there, but he's still not available for a couple of weeks. Jaden Hunt said hit the scoreboard across half forward. They're using Corey Wagner in the middle. And Oscar Baker and Trem Rivers also stood out with their speed. Changes for this week. We've got Sparrows out with the collarbone injury that he sustained during the game. Apparently James Jordan, who probably might have taken his place, has had a mishap in the gym. He's had some surgery on a finger, so I'm assuming maybe some weights fell on him. I don't know. Does anyone know what happened to James Jordan? George?
Yeah, apparently he jammed his finger in between 2 barbells, or dumbbells rather.
Sorry, what happened? It fell on him.
He jammed his finger in between two dumbbells in the weights room. So he's had plastic surgery on it. So it would seem that it would have been a rather nasty event.
Yeah, so Sparrow out hers. Looks like they're saying Gawn's ready to come back. I'm assuming that'll be a straight swap with Bruce, or maybe not. Do you think they've got two ruckmen, don't they? Do you, big man? What do you think? We go in with two ruckmen, or we just go in with Max?
I think we just go in with Max. I think that's what they should do, and that's what they probably will do. I just can't see them. Bruce isn't good enough up forward, although he's probably as mobile, and I'm not even being facetious, unfortunately, as Tom McDonald. So he could make a contest just as well as Tom McDonald. But I can't see them running the two rucks, even though, I could see the argument for it. I know George is probably keen on the two rucks. But my feeling is that they'll just run the one because it throws out their structure a fair bit, having the two where he has to rest up forward. Who does he replace up forward? We're already lacking a fair bit of mobility up forward, unless, of course, he does replace Tom McDonald.
Anyone else you see coming into the team this week? Maybe Jonesy, who was late withdrawal.
He had awareness. Burgess said awareness his calf, and I'm glad he did. I mean, it would be terrible if he didn't have some awareness of his calf. He wouldn't be able to run, would he? But by sounds of it, he'll be fit. He'll probably come back in. I mean, they'll be loath to make too many changes. What message does it send? Making lots of changes. Two, it's sort of counterproductive from what, as I was saying before, potentially an issue is how many forwards they've run through their 15. What are they going to do and add another 2 or 3? It's not going to help them build the synergy they need. They simply got to work harder. But they've already got, probably Bruce comes out, so that's 1. Swallow definitely comes out, that's 2. They won't want to make too many more. Maybe Hannon, who again, he wasn't impressive. He looked like a player who got called up 10 minutes before the game of footy. It'd be good to have some run. Personally, I'd like to see Rivers back in because, as George has noted, they're a quick side. They get it on the outside. If they do get it past that player on the switch, we've got to have someone who can run them down from behind. And if we don't, the same thing will happen to us again as happened this week.
George, your changes?
Yeah, I think we should be playing two rucks this week. As I said, I watched the Brisbane St Kilda game, and Ryder and Marshall absolutely rip us a new one if we have a single ruckman. Both of them, Ryder is in probably his best form in his career. He's not influential around the ground, but St Kilda drag him off onto the bench. Marshall is playing over 80% of game time, which is consistent with most players these days. And Marshall is a seriously good player as well. So if we expect Tom McDonald to come up against either of them, they will have a ball, and we'll finish up with the same situation as we've seen time and time again this year, robbing our forward line to try and solve a problem in the ruck hasn't worked. We just haven't got targets, and we don't kick goals. So I'd be leaving Bruce in there, even if you're playing him off the bench to match the time that Ryder's playing off the bench, so be it. But if we go in undermanned in the ruck, they will have like I said, an absolute ball. I can see Jonesy coming in again. Hannon and Spargo did very little up forward, and I can't see both of them keeping their roles this week. And I'd like to see Rivers back in to give us that bit of run and also kicking ability up the ground. I think we're going to lose one out of the forward line. We need to back up the forward line just to be the partner for Wiedemann and add the consistency that we're seeking up there. Every time we drag Tom down to the ruck, not only is Wiedemann left on his own, but it just ruins the whole structure of the forward line. The rest of the forwards superstar what to do, similar to what Bin Man's been talking about. So leave Tommy in, leave him up forward to help Weed out, two ruckmen, and then pick and choose between, maybe we need to be serious at last about whether Fritsch and Melcham are providing either the leadership or the consistency or the required pressure, or Hannon and Spargo out of the forward line. I think you need to lose one or two of those out of that forward line. They're just not producing what we need to win matches. So I think those are the only realistic changes that should be made. We've got quality. All of those players are quality players. I think if we start to see the Wagners playing, then we're really starting to scrape the barrel, quite frankly.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Boys, we're going to sort of leave it there almost. There's one more thing I want to talk about just because we've got terrible connection tonight. So apologies to listeners. We've got some... It's been going in and out. Not sure where that's coming from, one of our internet connections or maybe all of us. There was an incident. There was a racial vilification incident involving Kasai Pickett. There was a photo shared on one of Melbourne's official Instagram accounts, and then there was an offensive comment made. I don't know what it was, but it's probably best it's not mentioned. The comment was promptly removed, but this is, especially occurring any time. It's terrible, especially in the Sir Doug Nicholls round, which recognises Indigenous talent. It's just so disappointing that this. I mean, I'm not surprised it still happens, given some of the vitriol I see on social media, and I don't have much faith in humanity as it is, but you see comments like that, and it's just totally, it's abhorrent. I don't know what else to say about it, and I'm sure both of you agree too.
You can't say much more, can you, Andy? It is just disgraceful that there are people around who still think they can do and say these sort of things. And I think the only saving grace from today was the fool who made the comments and the death threats against Dylan Grimes was arrested today. And hopefully that sends the message to a few more of these other fools that putting things out on social media does mean that you can be caught and you will be prosecuted for these sort of things. So the threat of police action is maybe the only way we're going to do this, because I don't think we're going to get any hope or condolences from people like Facebook and all the other social media platforms. They seem to be avoiding policing on their own. So maybe we need to bring in the civil actions to get some sort of reaction against these people. It's just disgraceful.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that I think it has to go through the police, and that's the only way and publicly, because it's the only way that message is going to get through to people. Big Man, did you want to add to that?
Just actually sort of one sort of positive in this week on the back of a terrible, terrible negative. I'm sure you both read the article by Russell Jackson on ABC News about Robert Muir and the treatment that he experienced from all his life as a footballer, from the moment he started playing senior football as a 15-year-old in Ballarat right through to the end of his career at Woodfull, I think the Torrens, wasn't it? So just a heartbreaking. And but I think a real positive has been the response from the AFL, from St Kilda, from West Torrens as well. It'd be easy to be cynical and say that that's reflexive or that's a PR exercise, but I think that's being overly cynical, and I applaud the Saints for coming out. Acknowledging what they did was, what they didn't do and what they've not done subsequently, and similarly for West Torrens. And for anyone who's not read the article, it's for someone like myself who grew up in the 70s, and I went to hundreds of games of footy, and you'd hear racial abuse. It was so common that it wasn't even, you didn't even think about it. And so, I think that perhaps we've moved a little bit forward. A long way to go, but I thought the response was terrific about what was just a harrowing story.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's hope that we start seeing things change because at the moment it's not. We see it week in, week out. This racial abuse on social media, and it's really got to stop. All right, boys. I think we're going to leave it there because I think we've done our dash with this connection.
Sandy, on one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just the positive. The way to wrap that week up for us is that we're playing at the Alice, and Cosy didn't have a great game, I have to say, against the Dogs, but surely he'll play in the Alice, and so that's something to really look forward to. The Alice Springs game. It'll be at night, which I don't think we've played there at night before, and so that'll be fantastic to see. And the club's done a lot of work in the centre, so I'm really looking forward to that game. And I thought that the Dreamtime game up at Darwin and the Welcome to Country was just amazing. So if it's half as sort of powerful as that game, I think we'll be well pleased, win or lose.
What are the conditions this time of year up there like? Do you know?
I've got no idea.
Alice is a lot different from Darwin.
Darwin, yeah.
It's much drier, the heat, whereas Darwin in particular, because I've been up there for a couple of night games over the years. Darwin is magnificent during the day, and then as night falls, the dew starts to come down, and you would have seen how slippery and difficult it is to handle the ball. But Alice Springs is much drier, being in the centre of the continent. So you'll see a good game of football in terms of conditions. It'll be just magnificent to be able to watch it, and be even more magnificent to actually be there for the people.
Well,
and Andy, I'll just give you a weather forecast for Alice Springs on Saturday.
I'm on there. I'm on the app.
It's going to rain.
As we speak. No. We've got perfect sunshine all week.
Minimum 5, maximum 28. Sunny, light winds become increasingly northeasterly. No, it's only 15 to 20 kilometres. That's fine. During the morning, then becoming light during the day. So it'll be perfect. It's
9 p.m. there now. Today was 31 degrees there. I think Saturday's 28 degrees, but the 9 p.m. Sorry, not the low, but the 9 p.m. temperature, the current temperature now is 23 degrees there now. So you would assume that come Saturday it's going to be around 22, 23 at the time we're playing them. The perfect conditions. So, yep. All right, boys. Let's wrap it up there, and we'll be back. We'll be back next week. Hopefully not commiserating about. Let's go to the start of that song. Hopefully we're not commiserating about a loss in the end of the season for us. Let's hope we can get our season back on track and take a scalp, a proper scalp in the top 8, because I think we need one. All right, boys. Thanks, B Man. Thank you, George, and we'll see you next week. Go D's.
Go Redlegs. Yeah.
I've got this feeling.